The American Civil War, fought between 1861 and 1865, ripped apart the young nation. It pitted brother against brother, North against South. At the heart of this conflict lay the deeply divisive issue of slavery. The war's origins can be traced back to the earliest days of the Republic. Economic differences between the industrial North and the agrarian South exacerbated tensions. As the nation expanded westward, the question of free or slave states became contentious. The issue of states' rights also played a significant role. This belief in states' rights led to the secession of Southern states, forming the Confederacy. The stage was set for a bloody conflict. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth historical content. Following Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860, the secessionist movement gained momentum. Southern states, fearing that Lincoln's presidency would threaten their way of life, began to secede from the Union. South Carolina led the way, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. These states formed the Confederate States of America, electing Jefferson Davis as their president. The act of secession was a direct challenge to the authority of the federal government and set the stage for armed conflict. Both the North and the South began mobilizing their forces in preparation for war. The Union, with its larger population and industrial base, had a significant advantage in terms of resources. They called upon volunteers to join the Union Army, and factories were repurposed to produce weapons and supplies. The Confederacy, while lacking the industrial capacity of the North, had a strong military tradition and a fiercely determined population. They too called upon volunteers and began training their troops for battle. The early days of the war were marked by a sense of uncertainty and improvisation. Neither side was fully prepared for the scale and intensity of the conflict that lay ahead. Both sides scrambled to train their troops, secure supplies, and develop effective strategies. The initial battles were often chaotic and poorly coordinated, as both sides learned the hard lessons of war. The conflict quickly escalated from a localized dispute to a full-blown civil war. The secession of the Southern states and the formation of the Confederacy represented a fundamental challenge to the very concept of a united nation. The question of whether the United States was an indivisible union or a collection of sovereign states was now being put to the ultimate test. The answer would be determined on the battlefields across the nation, in a conflict that would claim the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans. The nation was on the brink of a cataclysmic war. The first shots of the Civil War were fired at Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, on April 12, 1861. Confederate forces bombarded the federal fort, forcing its surrender after a 34-hour siege. This event marked the beginning of the armed conflict and galvanized both sides into action. The attack on Fort Sumter served as a rallying cry for both the North and the South, solidifying their resolve to fight for their respective causes. Following the attack on Fort Sumter, President Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. This call to arms was met with enthusiastic response in the North, as men flocked to enlist in the Union Army. The initial enthusiasm for war was high on both sides, with many believing that the conflict would be short and decisive. However, the reality of war would soon prove to be far more brutal and protracted than anyone had anticipated. The early battles of the war were often characterized by confusion and inexperience. Both armies were still learning the art of war, and many soldiers were poorly trained and equipped. The Battle of Bull Run, fought in July 1861, was a sobering experience for both sides. The Union Army, expecting a quick victory, was routed by Confederate forces, demonstrating the challenges that lay ahead. This early Confederate victory shattered the illusion of a swift Union triumph. Despite the early setbacks, the Union Army continued to grow in size and strength. The North's industrial advantage allowed them to produce vast quantities of weapons, ammunition, and supplies. They also benefited from a larger population and a more developed transportation network. As the war progressed, the Union's superior resources would begin to play a crucial role in the outcome of the conflict. The long and arduous road to victory had just begun. Section 4. Tides of War. Key Battles and Strategies. The Battle of Antietam, fought in September 1862, was the single bloodiest day in American history. The battle resulted in a tactical draw. but it was a strategic victory for the Union. It prevented the Confederacy from gaining recognition from European powers and allowed President Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. This pivotal battle marked a turning point in the war, shifting the momentum in favor of the Union. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought in July 1863, is widely considered the turning point of the Civil War. The three-day battle resulted in a decisive Union victory and marked the Confederacy's furthest advance into Northern territory. The battle was a brutal and costly affair, with heavy casualties on both sides. Gettysburg represented a major turning point in the war, effectively ending the Confederacy's hopes of achieving victory. The Siege of Vicksburg, also in 1863, was a crucial Union victory that secured control of the Mississippi River. The siege lasted for 47 days, effectively cutting the Confederacy in two. The capture of Vicksburg was a major strategic blow to the Confederacy, disrupting their supply lines and weakening their ability to wage war. This victory solidified the Union's control of the western theater of the war. The Union's strategy focused on capturing key Confederate cities and controlling transportation routes. General Ulysses S. Grant's relentless pursuit of Confederate forces in Virginia and General William T. Sherman's devastating march through Georgia were instrumental in bringing the war to a close. The Union's superior resources and strategic planning ultimately proved decisive in their victory over the Confederacy. The relentless pressure applied by the Union Army gradually wore down the Confederate forces. Section 5. Leadership in Conflict, Figures of Influence. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, led the Union through the Civil War. His unwavering commitment to preserving the Union and his eloquence in articulating the war's purpose made him a symbol of national unity. Lincoln's leadership during this tumultuous period was instrumental in guiding the nation through its darkest hour. His Gettysburg Address, delivered at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, became one of the most famous speeches in American history. Ulysses S. Grant, the Union's top general, played a crucial role in the Union's victory. His relentless pursuit of Confederate forces in Virginia and his willingness to accept heavy casualties ultimately wore down the Confederate Army. Grant's determination and strategic brilliance proved essential in achieving the Union's objectives. His leadership and unwavering resolve were instrumental in bringing the war to a successful conclusion. Robert E. Lee, the commander of the Confederate Army, was a brilliant military strategist and a respected figure in the South. Despite his military prowess, Lee ultimately could not overcome the Union's superior resources and manpower. His surrender at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865 marked the end of the Confederacy and the beginning of the nation's healing process. Lee's leadership and military skill were widely admired, even by his adversaries. Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederate States of America, led the secessionist movement and oversaw the Confederacy's war effort. His leadership was often criticized and he struggled to unite the fractious Confederacy. Davis's presidency was marked by challenges and controversies, and his legacy remains a subject of debate among historians. His role in the Civil War remains a complex and controversial topic. Section 6. Life on the Battlefield, Soldiers' Experiences. Life for soldiers during the Civil War was harsh and unforgiving. They faced constant danger, disease, and deprivation. Soldiers endured long marches, inadequate food and supplies, and the ever-present threat of battle. The physical and emotional toll of war was immense, leaving lasting scars on many who served. The conditions in military camps were often unsanitary, leading to the spread of disease. Battles were chaotic and brutal affairs, often resulting in heavy casualties. Soldiers witnessed horrific scenes of carnage and suffering, experiences that would haunt them long after the war ended. The use of new technologies, such as rifled muskets and artillery, increased the lethality of combat. The psychological impact of witnessing such violence was profound, leaving many soldiers with deep emotional scars. Disease was a constant threat in Civil War camps and hospitals. Dysentery, typhoid fever, and other illnesses claimed the lives of thousands of soldiers. Medical care was often rudimentary, and many soldiers died from infections and complications. The lack of sanitation and proper medical facilities contributed to the high mortality rate among soldiers. The conditions in field hospitals were often appalling, with limited resources and overwhelmed medical staff. Despite the hardships they faced, soldiers on both sides demonstrated remarkable courage and resilience. They fought for their beliefs, their families, and their nation. The bonds of camaraderie forged in battle provided solace and support in the face of adversity. The shared experiences of war created a sense of brotherhood among soldiers, transcending the divisions that had torn the nation apart. The resilience and determination of Civil War soldiers are a testament to the human spirit.